Katie Nilafalcha. Welcome to Irish Granny Tarot. Welcome to our esteemed guest and author, Wes Manko, the author of the book we did yesterday, Your Best Defense. You can't expect me to remember the title. It's been 24 hours. In one ear, out the other. But this is a great book. I really enjoyed it, and we're going to have a wonderful conversation here. But first things first, happy Easter. It's
Happy Easter.
Easter Sunday. And you might want to check out my earlier video that I uploaded this morning on the Easter Rising in 1916 in Ireland, if you're interested. And it's a little historical overview. And Wes, I want you to tell us about yourself and how you came to write this book and establish your business. But my first question before we start this, you kind of referred me to another book you wrote, which I was not aware of. And I got a new phone and I don't know how to work it. And I lost the reference to the book, but I did retain a little bit. It's a novel and it's about an oligarch, and the description of the oligarch, you wrote this in 2021?
Yes, it's my recent work. It's my first venture into fiction. But what's, and some may say it's like dark humor, but basically the synopsis is there is the hero of the book is a journalism student who is investigating the father of a girl he has a crush on, who happens to be a Transylvanian oligarch who is involved in a scheme to gain the favor of other oligarchs through an immortality drug that has devastating side effects in order to steal the 2016 presidential election.
Yeah, and my question was going to be, where did you ever come up with such an idea? But before we go any farther, there
Sure.
sounds like we have some interference here in our sound, some crackling, and I just recorded and there was no crackling, so I'm wondering, do you have your phone on near you, or?
Well,
No?
my phone is laying down, but it's off.
Oh, okay. So I don't, well, we'll just plow ahead because I'm completely incapable of figuring it out.
Yeah,
So
same here.
yeah, we'll do our best. So why don't you tell us about your background and how you got into security and.
Sure. It was kind of a winding path. Academically, I have an associate degree in police science, a bachelor's in criminal justice, master's in public administration. I went into social type work, then I went into finance. In the meantime, I was studying a variety of martial arts, but when my finance obligations became overwhelming, I found that I was getting ill, and I made a choice to go back into martial arts, and I studied a variety of them, and additionally, I became certified to teach the English version is Sistema, the Russian pronunciation
Right, yeah.
is.
Yeah, I've never heard of that. I thought that was really interesting.
Well, it's interesting because I was taking Kyushu Jitsu at the time. And if you're looking at what language means, Kyushu means weak spot or weak point, and Jitsu means fighting. In other words, using pressure point self-defense. And I told my instructor, I was vacationing in Toronto. He said, check out this guy, Vladimir Vasiliev. He teaches something really strange. Well, I did. Now, I went over there, I think it's like 25, 26 years ago now.
Now, are we talking Russia?
Yeah, no, Toronto, Canada.
Oh.
He is from Russia, but
okay.
He's located in Toronto, Canada. He's a Canadian citizen. And I was amazed because I'm about 6 foot, about 260 pounds. And I was thrown around like a rag doll by a retired attorney about half my size. And this was just the complete opposite of what I've been learning. And it was so effective and so quick to learn. So I began to study it, and then I became certified to teach it. And I formed a company where on one end I would teach the Russian martial art. On the other end, I would do corporate seminars on violence prevention and self-defense. And during that 20-some year time period, I saw in the marketplace there was nothing in terms of preventing violence or preventing attacks from occur. And one thing I found really unique about the Russian system is their emphasis on intuition as a form of self-defense. In fact, what led me to study that was a videotape that the instructor had put out called Psychic Self-Defense. I was really intrigued by it. And now in Russian terminology, they blend psychology with psychic. So it kind
Yes,
of means
they
the same
do.
thing.
Yes, they're
It
much
kind of
more
means the same
open.
thing. So I started learning that, and then I became certified to teach it. And then from there, I extrapolated a 3-hour seminar that I did to Fortune 500 corporations, and then a lecture series that I did as well on preventing violence. And my clients included like Harley Davidson, library system, where I taught librarians and their security personnel. So the idea was to spot potential violence before it occurs,
Right,
and to be able to neutralize it.
right.
So from those experiences, I started writing books.
I thought it was really interesting. Your approach being awareness and intuition and preparedness rather than actually getting into a situation. I thought that was very interesting, very much a lot of the advice that Gavin DeBecker had. And I hope you don't mind, I glossed over some of the lists and bullet points that you had because I knew people would read them, and in the interests of making it a more concise video. But I thought it was very interesting. I was a little apprehensive when you first contacted me because I made, of course, as I always do, a judgment, the wrong assumption, which is anybody involved in that kind of security stuff is probably dealing with a lot of extreme right-wing gun nuts, and where are you really coming from? So I did Google you, and I was really excited to get some of your responses because it gave me a better sense of your frame of reference. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit more. A big question I have. So the book advocates avoidance and awareness using your own common sense and your own intuition. So how do you convince people, especially women, that you're not victim blaming when you talk about this, when you emphasize personal responsibility? I think that's a big issue. I agree with you, but I could see where people would get defensive and say, well, your victim shouldn't be the one responsible for preventing the crime.
Well, I've been advocating there should be classes that teach men not to rape.
Well, we're going to get into that.
And I've been also advocating self-defense classes for both men and women. And when I talk about personal responsibility, it's personal responsibility on both sides. Coming from the standpoint as a guy, when I took martial arts classes, it was like 90% guys. And that could be a guy thing, whether it's a macho thing or whether they want to defend themselves and their families. That's up to the individual participant. But everybody, male and female, has a personal responsibility. And you'll find that more heightened when family members are involved, both male and female, will protect the child. So
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah.
form of personal responsibility.
Yeah, you mentioned that women will tell you, it's your experience from classes, from groups, that women will say, well, I don't think I could ever kill somebody or hurt somebody, but I could to defend my child.
Right, and I have a technique that I do, and this applies to all human beings. Human beings, when they grow up, are by nature nonviolent. Violence is learned, and it's learned sometimes as an offshoot from contact sports because they think of, oh, I can get hit, and so I can hit somebody else. Now, I'm not blaming sports or anything like that. It's just a process of growing up. You know, whether a person is bullied and then decides to bully somebody else. But the idea is that when you're in that arena and you're learning this type of behavior, it also depends on who you associate with and how you carry yourself as to how you're going to respond to other individuals. So when I talk about things like personal responsibility, it applies across the board. So it's not just women, it also includes men. Now, when I teach women, and to get to your point, one of the things that I do to emphasize what you just said is I say, I will show you a technique that is 100% effective at stopping an individual that's attacking you. Do you want to see it? And I go, sure. Okay. Then when somebody's attacking you, you place the back of your hand, the back of his head, take your thumb and into the eyeball. And I say, how many of you will be able to do that? So out of 100 women, I get maybe 6 to 10. And I said, what if I show you a similar technique that doesn't cause any bodily harm? Would you do that? And they say yes. And then I say, okay, same thing with the back of the hand, but now you're going to strike down on the anterior adenoidal nerve at a 45-degree angle. This causes pain and disorientation, but no injury. Would you do that? And then all the hands go up. So what we're talking about really is a level of psychological ability to carry out a defense. And this is not a male or female thing, it's a human thing, and it ranges from individual to individual. Some men are the same way. They don't want to kill
I was
somebody.
going to ask you, do you find that reticence is more prevalent in women, but apparently not?
It's an individual thing. So I've had men that prefer to do pressure points, and now they may be approaching it more from a legalistic standpoint because somebody shows up and you're holding somebody's eyeball. That doesn't look well. However, when somebody shows up, the person's on the ground, they're stunned, but there's nothing physically wrong with them.
I want to go back to something that you said that I think bears a whole lot more discussion in society. And people who feel the way you do, because I agree with you, are reluctant to talk about this too much. It's not socially popular. And that is that our culture promotes competition and promotes sports, organized team sports, as a sort of substitute for violence and as an expression of violence. And I'm not all about that at all. And that's not a popular point of view. It's not something many people will even discuss because the pushback is enormous. But if I had the power, I would eliminate organized team sports in schools. And I would tell children, go back and get friends together and play a game together. You don't need the adults buying uniforms and charging dues and doing league this and league that. I think it's a mindset and it's pervasive, and organized sports is just one part of it. Sounds like you might feel the same way.
I take more of an individualistic approach. By that I mean it depends on the sport. Like soccer, which is basically running, track, swimming, and the reason for that is because we have so much of a problem with obesity that if children don't necessarily have a constructive outlet. But what I would also add on is meditation, mandatory meditation in schools for 30 minutes, which has proven to be effective in lowering violence across the board.
I agree with you, but I'm laughing because I have a friend that I haven't spoken to in a very long time because of the atmosphere, right? She's a fundamentalist Christian, and some of the teachers here in our little town were doing yoga with the kids. She lost her mind because it was satanic, demonic or something. I don't think that's a popular point of view. I completely agree with you, but I don't think that's the way middle America, goes.
Yeah, and it also takes a focus in where in the country you look at. And because of my background, I went to private school, and you had basketball, football, and things of that nature. I didn't participate because I didn't really like that stuff. From a preventing violence point of view, when parents come up and say, I want to take my child into sport martial art, and he's 10 years old or she's 10 years old, what would you recommend? And I say the first thing I'd recommend is see if your school has a good wrestling program. The reason being, not only do you learn a defensive tactic, but you make friends. So you have a gang. So, and this applies even if you do a chess club.
And it's a one-on-one sort of situation.
Right.
Yeah, I completely, you mentioned soccer, and I have all girls, and most of them took soccer, but they're real arty, a couple of them were more into it than the others, but never, wholeheartedly. But it was a nightmare for me because Saturday morning at dawn, out on a grassy field that was wet and cold, we live in a cold area, and parents pacing the sidelines like restless caged cats, screaming, be aggressive. And I saw so many unnecessarily aggressive behaviors on the field from girls towards other girls. It was shocking to me. So I think you're right. I think it is an individual thing, but I do believe that many parents, I would say even the majority of parents, buy into the benefit of team aggression. And
Well, I agree with you in terms of aggression, because the problem with that is they carry that off the field.
yeah.
And then pretty soon it's brother versus sister, sister versus
Yeah.
brother, classmate versus classmate. So the focus there should be on proper teaching by the coach, that the idea here is fitness and self-expression, not winning at all costs. And
Yeah.
that used to be back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s called good sportsmanship.
Yeah, what was that? No, I totally hear you. And just ask yourself, who's the big shot in school? It's the football player, the football hero. Hero for what heroic thing does a football player do? I'd like to know. Somebody please explain. Yeah. So that's a topic we could go really down a rabbit hole with that. But I wanted to ask you something else that you said. You said in your book that the CDC recommends that people start a dialogue with young boys, as young as you can get, to inculcate them with respect for women and options for physical violence and negotiation abilities, and not lead them down that path. You and I were talking before we started recording about this explosion and professed agenda on social media, online, to recruit young boys, to brainwash them, to propagandize them. They start with dating sites. You're 13 and you Google how to make a girl like me. And the next thing you know, you've got a little right-wing extremist on your hands. A lot of parents don't realize that this is happening. And I wonder if you could talk about that in relationship to the increase in college campus violence.
Well, I think you're seeing with the onslaught and popularity of social media and different social media sites. And again, I go a little bit into the individual thing. Part of this is also a parental responsibility to make sure they know what's going on and utilize parental controls and things of that nature. But there should also be courses in whether it's grade school or high school, warning the kids, to watch out for this stuff. Uh, when you're looking at relationships, some of the Scandinavian countries have relationship courses on how to treat each other with respect.
Yeah.
And that is something that I think would be a benefit here because that is not addressed. It's basically whatever goes on in what's health class, and then the rest is up to you and your parents. I would think that if parents are interested in that, the school should provide a class as an elective for the parents that choose that. So that way, they can have a more rounded education when it comes to relationships and treating each other with respect.
I completely agree with you. I don't know how you feel about the manipulation of curricula at this point. They're trying very hard to eliminate, any kind of historical facts that might, trespass on extremist beliefs. And hand in hand with that is misogyny. Hand in hand with racism is almost always misogyny. And, it's being reinforced in religious groups. So, I don't even have the words to ask the question because it's appalling and perplexing. What are your views on it?
Well, you have to look at it historically and currently what's happening now. You can go back to when Ronald Reagan started to use what's called the Southern Strategy.
Yeah.
Now, for those of you who don't know what the Southern Strategy is, the Republican Party at that time was mostly made up of wealthy and mostly oil wealthy individuals, and it was seen as focusing on the really successful millionaires and things of that nature.
Corporate interests.
Corporate interests. However, at the same time, the unions were very, very powerful. And Reagan's job, which he did rather well, was to basically destroy the unions.
Yeah, I remember the air traffic controllers. Oh,
right.
Man.
But partially too, the unions didn't fight back. They basically thought, well, he's just going to go after that one, but not us, which was a big mistake. They should have fought back, and the Democratic Party should have been more helpful at that point. But what happened was, after that happened, they still needed more votes. So, and there was a discussion in the Republican Party because some Republicans didn't want to do this. I think Nelson Rockefeller was against the Southern Strategy. The idea of the Southern Strategy was to go and recruit religious evangelicals as well as going down south and attracting individuals that had prejudices and the type of people that traditionally weren't involved in that. But with the Republicans being having the money and then these individuals having the dedication, I mean, going up like at 5 a.m. and doing doors, that seemed to be working. Now that has peaked. So when that peaked, social media was rising. So they started to use the platforms, and it appears to be like a last-ditch effort to try to recruit these individuals into their ranks. Because if you can see by the last elections, and I was just a news program this morning, in Wisconsin how Judge Janet Protasevich won areas that were traditionally Republican, and in heavy Republican areas, she came close to winning. So what's been happening is I think there's an unseen vote called Republican women voting Democrat because they're finding out what's going to happen to them and to their daughters.
All they have to do is read Margaret Atwood. We could have told
Yeah.
them that in the beginning of the 80s. The
Right,
writing was
and
on the wall.
right, and so in a sense of, I know you're bringing up a lot of concerns, but I'd like to bring up some good news, is that this is shifting. This is shifting to where more and more people are being aware of this. And there are efforts by groups like the Southern Poverty Law Center, probably others, to track the stuff that's going on social media and to acknowledge it. There's a great book of what's happening now by a naval intelligence officer by the name of Malcolm Nance.
Oh, yeah.
Called They Want to Kill Americans.
I covered it. We
Oh.
did it on the channel, months ago, so long ago, but I covered it when it came out.
Right.
It's a fabulous book. Yeah. Oh, so I guess you were saying focusing on the downside, and there are some optimistic looking things happening, trends. Look what happened in Tennessee the other day. Oh my God. I haven't made a video about it yet because I've just been disturbed so much by it that it's hard to collect thoughts about it. It's such blatant, overt racism that it.
Well, they're at the point where it's, how can I put it? There's really nothing left for them to do other than reveal their true colors.
Yes.
And bully to see what happens. Now, in conversations I have with people regarding politics, I say there's like a two-party system. We have a party of bullies and unfortunately a party of cowards, because there are things that can be done in terms of stuff like this that just isn't being done. And there's a whole umbrella of stuff. There's things that Biden can do in terms of making sure that there was actually an effective investigation on Kavanaugh, because it was squashed. The FBI didn't really do their job on that. And I could go on with another list, but that's kind of getting away from.
Yeah, well, I agree with you, and in that context, I do have a relevant question about Democrats that are being cowards. There are a handful. There are those who speak out. Swalwell comes to mind. Raskin comes to mind, and there are a few more. Katie Porter. Katie Porter for president and vice president. But there is one representative that I just saw earlier, and unfortunately, I did not write his name down, and it was a difficult name, so, but he was in a debate with Marjorie Taylor Greene in the House of Representatives. And
I saw that.
You had like a plaid coat.
Yep.
Yeah, it was wonderful. I recommend everybody look for it. And it's a debate about guns. And he basically talks about these high-powered guns are not used for hunting, because if you do, there's nothing left of the deer. And that's what happens to children. And he is brutally frank and brutally honest about it. And it was refreshing to hear somebody take a clear-headed stand. So this is a topic I really wanted to ask you about, because this is relatively new. You talk about it somewhat in your book, but it's gotten so much worse since your book came out in just, a couple of years. It's horrible. So the question is, where do you see this going? The NRA has its hooks in all these politicians.
Well, if the question is a political one, I think we're going to see more regulation. Now, with my background and my academic background, I see that there was a failure in the House when the Democrats had it to pass a law regarding stochastic terrorism.
Yes.
Now, this technique was initially developed by the Nazis, and what it is you instead of using logic, you use hate and justify a specific individual group over and over until an act of violence occurs.
That's right.
Now, if they had enacted that, and I don't know if the Senate would have passed it or not, but at least it would have been there for the current Senate if they wanted to take it up. This would basically nullify a lot of the hateful right-wing talk that all it does is just attack people. The other thing was to bring back the fairness doctrine.
Yes.
Because the reason we got the fairness doctrine was because GIs went over to Germany after the war and did an analysis. They found out the power of propaganda.
Propaganda. It's incredibly powerful. Have you seen Jen Senko's documentary, The Brainwashing of My Dad?
I have not, but I heard about it. There is one other thing that nobody is looking at that is rather neutral and could be beneficial, and that is technology in nonviolent self-defense. We already have existing technology in pepperball guns that can knock somebody out but not cause damage. We've got tasers. I think, I'm not sure if it's in the Netherlands or somewhere around there, they have net guns, a gun that shoots a net over an attacker.
Oh, I love that. That's wonderful.
So where there was a lobbying effort for lethal weapons, now I grew up at the time when I was taking police science where they were turning more into the use of tasers. But then I think it was Glock or a similar company came in with really cheap guns. So for budgetary reasons, they swung in that direction. But even though now you can still, there's in some departments you are required to have access to a taser. But what nobody's looking at is there should be the formation of a lobby for non-lethal weapons that can overcome lethal weapons for a number of benefits. Besides saving lives, they're cheaper. You're not spending that much. And it doesn't require that much practice. So one of the things that's not being looked at that I'd like to look at is the exploration of non-lethal technologies as applied to self-defense situations. So that's something that needs to take a little bit of a closer investigation. Now, the other part where I think if we're looking at passing legislation, I know there's a lot of talk with an assault weapons ban, and I do favor an assault weapons ban because we had one before and it worked. But it may be easier to try to ban open carry and concealed carry because there really is no constitutional protection that I find that allows you to do that. So now I'm not an attorney, so I mean I could be wrong on this, but there have been a number of cases, and I bring one up in the book, where somebody is walking around with an assault weapon. They call in the police. Police says, "Oh, open carry state, you can do that." Then the person then goes to his former employer and kills a bunch of people. So I see it as a kind of a connected dot. It's not just one thing, and it's a cultural shift.
Yeah, and look what happened in New Zealand when over 50 people were killed in 2 mosques in one day with automatic weapons. The Prime Minister, I think President Jacinda Ardern just went on air and said, "That's it. All guns are illegal." Overnight, that's it. We're not going to tolerate this in this country. And, they, of course, there's the random situation that's almost unavoidable, but that put a huge stop to that kind of violence in New Zealand.
One of the reasons that happened, and also in 1991 in Port Arthur, Australia, where there was a mass shooting, is they published the photos of the victims. And
I think we should do that. How do you feel about that?
I agree. I
I
think
think people would be
there's
horrified.
actually, I think there's some laws in the books that forbid that from happening.
Well, they don't even let you see them unloading the coffins of dead soldiers from the back end of a plane when they're brought home from wherever else they were
Right,
shooting
which can
people.
be argued as a First Amendment violation, but nobody's really arguing it.
I so much agree with you. I was thinking about this earlier today in preparation for this conversation. There was that factor. I believe that they should not out of disrespect, and I feel terrible for the families of victims and the friends of victims, but we don't want more victims and
Well,
more families. So we
we
need to let people know what this really means when you walk in with an automatic weapon and mow down a classroom full of second graders, for God's
we,
sake.
we need to get the parents of those children on board, and it has to be an effort on their part.
Yeah. Well, they've
The
tried. They just arrested the mother of one of the Uvalde victims because she was protesting.
mm,
I don't know. I forget which state that
but
was, but
I would say it's up to the parents to get those photos into
oh,
the
yeah,
newspapers to see what's really going on.
yeah, yeah. I think you're absolutely right. And I think that would be so horrifying. The other element, you just mentioned it, was these particular nonviolent self defense alternatives would be cheaper. Appealing to the financial aspect of the gain, and I firmly believe that they have to take money out of politics 100%.
Oh
Do
yeah,
what they do in a lot of other countries. The media offers 20 minutes to every candidate. There's I don't know, a 6-week campaign period, and you don't get donors and you don't get lobbyists.
we had that before Citizens United, or we had
Yes.
a form of that. So again, when the Democrats had the House, they should have put forth a bill to end Citizens United. Even though it might not have passed, at least it was on the books.
Yeah.
But I have a really positive outlook in terms of what I think is going to be going on. I think we're going to suffer through about a year and a half or maybe 2 years some turbulence, but the effect of what happened in Tennessee has so snowballed into a national, I'm not going to say emergency, but a national notification
Yes.
that there needs to be something done about this. And one interesting thing, the Republican Party leadership is silent. So,
Well, there's a
what
big
that,
shockaroo.
well, they're silent in the standpoint that traditionally they would back
Yeah.
this effort. They're not backing this effort. And if you look at the recent losses they had in Wisconsin and other locations, they're having a conversation with themselves because the Republican Party is really having its own civil discourse
Yeah.
because they're seeing that the issues that initially got people galvanized emotionally are not working intellectually. So they're losing votes, and their party leadership has to decide what the future of that party is going to be.
It's difficult for me because I have a less, I can't think of the word, I'm less willing to make excuses for the Democrats. I think that they engage in corporate greed every bit as much as the Republicans. I think that they're just more careful about their image. The Republicans have lost their minds as far as their image.
Let me interrupt in terms of the history of that. So we talked about the disintegration of the unions, and the unions were the big financial supports of the Democratic Party. And so now we're into 1990, and Bill Clinton is running. He is not getting enough support from the unions. So he crosses the line. He
Yeah,
doesn't go with the oil millionaires, he goes with Wall Street.
yeah, yeah.
So this is where you have that linkage happen, but it's happened because if they didn't get that support, they would not win.
It's
Because
my understanding that the gun and oil, the fossil fuel companies are trying to do a runaround around things that were set in place to stop big tobacco. And they kind of learned from that process how they can get around regulation and around the control of their particular industry.
Yeah, they did that. However, and again, I throw this to the Democrats, there's nothing preventing them from creating advertising in terms of the impact of lax gun laws.
So why do you suppose they don't?
Well, my particular theory is, and this goes way back to when Reagan was governor and he was running for the primary, the Democratic friends I had and ones in leadership positions were saying, gosh, we hope this Reagan guy wins because nobody's going to vote for a guy that acted with a monkey. And the problem is you've got a lot of these people in party leadership that are attorneys and think they can argue the case like a law case, whereas Republicans use marketing firms and professionals in terms of swaying emotional opinions. The other things that they've done is they bought a bunch of radio stations
Yeah.
throughout the country. The Democrats are just starting to do that. Traditionally, what the Democratic strategy was, if you can call it a strategy, is you wait till 9 months before the election, you do canvassing, you send out a bunch of flyers. Meanwhile, the Republicans have had 2 years at a radio station 24/7 getting their message out.
Yeah.
The recent purchases have been in Hispanic communities, and now you know that Hispanic communities are trending more Republican.
It kind of depends on what you're talking about because they're not monolithic. You know, if you come from
True.
Cuba,
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they are individualistic, but
yeah,
I'm
Cuba and
saying that there's a
Mexico,
whole
very
bunch of
different.
money, a whole bunch of money thrown in to those radio stations.
Right.
And the Democrats are just catching on now in terms of that. And it has been initially the strategy of, well, the Democrats just need to do fundraising. No, you need to do more than just fundraising.
Oh, way more. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, wasn't Roger Ailes, didn't he work for Nixon? I mean, wasn't he
Oh, yeah.
in marketing for a very long time, sort of a image manufacturing
Right.
and propaganda for a very long time.
Right.
And
I mean, and what blessings the Democrats have had came from George Lakoff, who wrote a number of books, including, Why is Kansas Red or something about.
that sounds familiar. Yeah.
Yeah, but Google George Lakoff, you'll get his books. But he latched onto this strategy that, and this is when Reagan eliminated the Fairness Doctrine, the radio programs that promoted that type of philosophy were focused on exciting emotions and never mind telling the truth, just get people angry and out to the polls. And it worked. It was working. Now, because the elimination of Roe and a whole bunch of other stuff, the American people, which again, we're talking about responsibility as voters, are waking up and it's going, oh, this isn't happening the way I thought it would be. What's going on? And they're becoming more active. So while I can blame the Democrats, I can also blame people that as individuals don't participate enough in this democratic republic to make things happen that would benefit them.
I have an ongoing debate with my adult children who are very left wing, very aware. They're all vegan, and they several of them, they're raising small children and they just tell me constantly it's all we can do to keep our heads above water financially and raise our children so that they're not shot while they're in school. And I can't, Mom, I just can't listen to another diatribe against Trump, which is why I started this channel, because they were tuning me out and my frustration was just becoming epic. And I think they're very representative of a lot of people now. They vote and they're aware and they do what they can do, but there's not enough actual physical participation in the process across the board. People are overwhelmed and distracted, and I think it's intentional.
It is. And back in the 30s, that's why you had the rise of unions,
Yeah.
because people weren't making enough money. And that's why you have, like, I think in Bayview, you had the Bayview riots where I think police officers killed some people, and then the rioters killed some police officers. And this whole thing escalated, but eventually the unions won. They got 8-hour workday and things of that nature
Yeah.
by organizing. You are seeing the same thing happen now. In fact, young people are really stepping up to the plate and getting more and more active,
Yeah.
especially the young people in Tennessee.
Well,
Um,
it's cyclical, and after the unions gained so much power after the war, they demonized them all as socialists. Some of them were socialists, which is not a bad word in my dictionary, but what goes around comes around. Look at what happened the other day in San Francisco. There was that tech billionaire. I've never heard of him. I can hardly
mhm,
use my iPad,
mhm.
but he was stabbed to death on the street. And that kind of the violence coming home to the people who think they're insulated from it. Will that make a difference?
Well, I don't think anybody is truly insulated given the easy access to firearms. But at the same time, um, you have different individuals just trying to survive and living paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah, it's very
Uh,
hard.
right, and there needs to be, and I think it's starting. It's certainly under Biden, a stronger appreciation for unions. And you
Yeah.
had and I love Bernie Sanders for bringing this point up. You have people like the CEO from Starbucks, which basically supports all these liberal causes, but then won't put a union in.
He makes over 400 times a year what his
Right.
average employee makes. And then he can get on camera and look the public in the eye with a clear conscience. I do
Right.
not understand that. And who was I reading about the other day? I in one ear out the other. Some company that was making 700% more than it made last year. Oh, who
Hmm.
was that? This is going to drive me crazy. This is what happens when you get old. I can barely remember my own name. But there you go. There's this is my problem with all political people is they may support ostensibly fairness, social justice. Look what they did to Bernie Sanders.
Hmm. Well, and that brings up a very valid point, because at what point do you make a commitment to your values? But the interesting thing about Bernie Sanders, you'll notice from the polls that people that weren't able to vote for Bernie Sanders ended up voting for Trump, because Bernie Sanders is a populist. He tells the people the truth. Now, people thought Trump was telling them the truth.
I was going to say, so they wanted the opposite?
So, well, see, but that's the thing. If you're saying the same thing, and again, Trump was mentioning healthcare, he was mentioning some of the similar stuff, and then when Bernie Sanders lost, Trump said, "Poor Bernie, it's Hillary's fault." So, but he was playing a game. However, there is the sense of populism, and Bernie Sanders is right, and the Democratic Party, I think, maybe has just started to tap into that. But the young people seeing what's going on, especially women seeing what's going on with Roe, that has been a huge game changer.
Yeah. Well, the misogyny is no longer even, they don't even pretend anymore. They don't attempt to hide it. And there's this white Christian national, Christo fascists. I make no bones about it anymore.
Hmm.
Uh, this patriarchal theocratic system that wants women at home barefoot and pregnant and shut up. And that's what they're pushing for.
Well, historically, that's always been there, but it hasn't been that prevalent in social media as it is now because of the popularity of social media.
Oh my
I mean, you
God.
you've had pockets in the country where that was the norm,
Yeah.
and that wasn't questioned. But now with social media, you have a huge recruiting tool. And I go back to history in the 1930s or so. The Nazis stumbled on their social media called a radio, and what they
Yes.
wanted
Every
to,
house got one.
and every house got
Yeah.
one, but it only had one channel, and that was
Like
to
North Korea.
yeah, and that was to the Nazi Party.
Yeah.
So that's why we got the fairness doctrine to try to represent both sides of the view. And what's interesting thing is people can dialogue. When I taught my self-defense classes and Russian martial art classes, I had both conservatives and liberals, and they got along well because there's open dialogue and there's a respect that we're learning something where we don't want to hurt each other, but we want to defend ourselves. So that underlying dialogue or can be achieved, but the thing is, there's so many people that will just listen to one side without going over to the other side. But again, the underlying issue there is truth.
Yeah. And propaganda is powerful because brainwashing is neurological and that's hard to overcome. It's constantly reinforced because they're tuning into the same thing. Plus, with social media, my opinion is the anonymity. When people sit in a room face to face and talk, makes it much more difficult to espouse violence and to be attacking personally. Uh, I've heard a number of different podcasters and people on YouTube that do news channels. They will get in touch with these people who say horrible things. They leave these recorded messages with all sorts of nasty name calling and threats. When they call them up, they're just nice, ordinary people when they talk to them one on one. So there's a sense of empowerment in anonymity. And I think if you step back and look at that a little bit more metaphysically, we need to recognize the humanity in each other and stop with the technical interaction. I don't know how you go about that. Every single person you meet is doing this the whole time. I've had people here that I've been talking to who've been down looking at their phone while, while we're having a conversation. It's astounding.
Well, the benefit of, if there's a benefit in that, is the young people are so effective at using social media to gain their point across. So, I mean, there is an upside to that in terms of organizing, in terms, some have used social media as a communication tool in terms of protesting.
Yes.
So I do recognize that there is a negative impact to the misuse of social media. But we also have to take a look at, maybe what are some of the positive impacts of it.
Yeah. I'm not a big social media person. In fact, it takes all of my effort to actually answer an email. I've got other things going on, but that culture has changed and it has to be acknowledged and it can be put to positive use. I wish people spent less time watching TikTok dances. There are choices to be made here. I think I wonder what you think about this, that young people are, they're the hope. I think they are becoming empowered and activated.
I totally agree. I think the future of this country rests in the hands of young people. They're more technologically savvy. They're now well organized. They're articulate. They're hardworking. Um, and I think you're going to see change come about by their greater involvement
Yeah.
in the political process.
Yeah.
One note on the TikTok controversy, since we're talking about social media, and I can't take credit for this because it's something Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said, which is the real issue is the stealing of information by all tech companies.
That's right. It's not
So,
they're singling them out because China is the big enemy, right?
okay, but is there a law, for example, if TikTok gets banned, that an American social media company can't sell information to China? Does such a law exist? She had a really valid point, is just stop collecting the data. I mean, and if you do that, then if TikTok continues to collect the data, it's gone. But at the same point, if an American company continues to collect the data, it's gone or
Yeah.
punished, or there's an appropriate mechanism of a response.
Well, I hate to sound conspiratorial, but who's the biggest collector of data of them all? It's the government. I mean, that they don't want to shoot themselves in the foot. Pardon the expression. You know,
But
putting out.
there's an interesting um, point in the film, which I think the film was called Snowden, where he's working as a contractor for the NSA,
Yeah.
and one of the other guys and says, "Let me show you our greatest data collection system," and he showed him Facebook.
I can't believe you said that because I refuse to engage with Facebook from almost the extreme very beginning. And I'm always telling my children, Facebook, the CIA's best friend. And, they roll their eyes. Oh, it's so conspiratorial. Well, mark my words. I wanted to ask you about something. You mentioned a movie, and it didn't jog my memory right away. And I looked it up and I went, oh my God, I love that movie. I watched it and loved it. Amsterdam.
Yes,
Fabulous movie. Fabulous.
when you start to look at it, and I like artsy films, but I was thinking initially, it's a murder mystery. It's
Yeah.
so artsy, and then it hits you in the gut in the end because it's true.
Robert De Niro, right?
Robert De Niro, and what this is really about is the business plot of, I think it was 1933.
Yeah.
Where there was,
So, the foundation is historically factual.
yeah,
It leans heavily on film noir. It's got that great retro feel to it. The acting is fabulous. It's just
phenomenal.
really engaging movie. And I couldn't believe, I was so embarrassed when I realized this is probably my favorite movie I've seen in several years. And I didn't even remember it.
Did you go into the credits and did you see the real speech by General Smedley Butler?
Yes, I did. I watched that. Yeah, I would recommend that movie to everybody. It's well worth the hour and a half, 2 hours. Yeah, Chris Rock is in it.
Yeah,
And he's
a
great.
huge amount of stars are in it. Robert De Niro,
Yeah,
Taylor Swift is in it.
that's right. I'd forgotten about that. Yeah, of all people. Yeah. It's just a remarkable movie, and it kind of faded out of attention very, very quickly.
Well,
Because it's not about a comic book.
what's interesting thing is they say the movies tend to predict the future, and I think there's been patterns throughout our history. Because when we look at the Civil War, a lot of people don't know that the South was an oligarchy. You had just a few people controlling the money aspect.
Don't you think people don't know that?
No, they're thinking that it was just about slavery, but the reason slavery was there was so a bunch of rich people could get richer.
Well, the country started out that way. The founding fathers, if I can use that term, in this country were very wealthy, landowning, enslaving white men.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing though is they had the experience of fighting the British, and the British were owned by the East India Tea Company. The throne was owned by the East India Tea Company. So John Adams was really adamant about not having corporations.
Yeah.
He said that he said at the most have the corporation last 40 years, and then it has to prove what good it did to society. So you've had now we've gotten away from that as time has gone on. It's changed to where corporations have way more control. and way more rights than the founding fathers had initially intended.
Well, people are very complicated, and I tend to rail against the men who started this country for those particular reasons. But every 4th of July, I managed to dig up all their quotations about separation of church and state. So they're a mixed bag. And as I said, people are complicated. It's too easy to demonize somebody, and but it's very difficult. I'm not excusing or rationalizing, the way they made their money was reprehensible. But why do you think the 1619 project is such a big thing? People trying to eliminate it.
Well, it's interesting because the Constitution is largely, well, I would say largely, but there's part based on the forms of government that were present in the Indian nations. In fact,
Yeah, the five nations. Yeah.
Thomas Jefferson
Yeah.
brought some Native Americans to discuss this, and when they were discussing it, the Native Americans said, "Where are the women? Some of our chiefs are women.
Yeah.
Why don't the women have a say in this?"
Good question.
So,
Very good question.
They took what they liked and what they could get away with and put that together. And it is a document where you basically kind of had to make a deal with the devil to allow slavery and not address it at this point. And that was
in order to let the South have their militias so that they could prevent what happened in Haiti from happening in South Carolina or wherever. Yeah. That was really, talk about a weak foundation to begin on. And
well, there was a discussion prior. There was a discussion of amendment, which I don't know was a Second Amendment or not. The discussion was that in times of war, there would be a federal militia which would borrow from the states. Now, the southern states didn't want that because that means it would end their slave trade.
And they didn't. When they were debating the whole structure, they didn't want a standing army.
Correct.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are surprised to hear that. They didn't believe in it because they saw what happened with the English, and they had this system. The English did before the colonies revolted, where they would bring in military, usually German, the Hessians, right? Bring them in and then enforce the citizens to house them. So, and I've read a lot of books about people complaining these guys would come in and they'd spit on the floor and put their feet on the tables and molest their daughters. And it was a terrible situation because the population had no power over it. That was one of the things that pushed the writers of the Constitution against a military, well, other things too, but that was one of the factors. I always thought that was so interesting.
Well, I am always enthralled by the genius level of some of our founding fathers that were so forward thinking. Now, granted, they all had negatives and they were all slave owners, and there's a lot of negatives there. But at the same time, during that time period, this was the most egalitarian document. And it was also the leading social document that got the French going into their.
That's right. And, just the concept that your DNA is not better than my DNA. You think that your genealogy gives you the right to boss me around. That was a concept that most people couldn't wrap their heads around. They were convinced that royal families, and don't even get me started on that, that they were given by God-given right to rule over everybody else. That was a social earthquake for them, a cultural earthquake for them to propose that we were all equal. Sounds so simple now, but at the time it was revolutionary.
Yeah, it really was, and we had a lot of geniuses at that time period that were involved in the founding of this nation. And yes, they definitely wanted a separation of church and state because they saw what was going on in England.
Oh, you mean that separation of church and state junk that
Yeah.
Laura, what's her name, Boebert talks about?
Mhm.
That's how she refers to it. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you gotta keep in mind that in certain areas of the country, right-wing talk and social media is so prevalent that it doesn't matter if something is right or wrong. It just matters that it's a viewpoint that you like.
Yeah. It hits on the right buzzwords, triggers
Right.
emotions. Yeah. It's called dog whistles.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then people are so conditioned that, in one sense, you could say they're brainwashed just to follow in that particular fashion. That is changing, though, and I don't want to be the perennial optimist here, but with young people being involved and this issue in Tennessee, which we haven't seen the last of, because
Oh, no, 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 no. Those two young men. It's just
they're
awful.
making the rounds to every talk show.
Oh, are they? Because I don't,
Oh yeah,
I don't watch all that stuff, but I do know this little tidbit is that the process in Tennessee is such that they could turn around and run again and be elected again very shortly from now and be right back in the same position that they got booted out of. But now there's public awareness, national awareness. This may have been kicking a wasp's nest, you know?
it was. In fact, I had a political prediction that there would be some type of mass shooting that would lead to some changes in laws. And I think
Do
we're
you
kind
mean like a psychic?
of, yeah,
Oh, and was this something recent? I mean, it's upcoming kind of
December.
thing. Pardon?
I had this thought in December. I was looking at what I would think would happen throughout the year.
So do you think it has happened now, like Uvalde, or do you think?
I think this is even more um, widespread than Uvalde because it involves Uvalde was a mass shooting. This was a mass shooting and a political censorship. It's going back
Oh,
to
you're
Jim
including the
Crowell,
shooting in Tennessee. Yeah,
right, in
yeah.
Tennessee.
I see what you're saying. Sorry, I
So,
was yeah.
oh, that's okay. So it's now gone beyond the shooting to the involvement of the political process, whereby voices are being stifled.
It's
So that's going to be a
just
huge
mind-boggling.
backlash
Yeah.
in terms of individuals. Um, because while that may be popular in Tennessee, which is extremely gerrymandered,
Yeah.
and there's also gerrymandering in Wisconsin, but I think that may be getting resolved soon.
Yeah. Lucky you guys. Yeah.
So, and there has been talk of impeaching the judge, but the
The
thing is,
new judge?
yeah,
Oh,
because
she just got voted in, right?
right, but see, the way that the laws are written, the group that has the majority in in the assembly and a supermajority in the Senate can replace civil servants. However, if she's replaced, the governor can just put in a new one. So you're basically just going back and forth, back and forth.
And
So
who's the governor in Wisconsin?
Tony Evers,
And is he Democrat?
yeah. See the Democrats won huge in the governor, the attorney general, secretary of state.
Like in
Uh,
Michigan?
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
but the assembly and senate, because of gerrymandering, are controlled by Republicans.
Yeah, it's pretty blatant and breathtaking how that has been used to deprive people of their democratic voice. Incredible to me. I just, and that's that's the thing. I was thinking when you were talking, you said you were apologizing for being an optimist, and I was laughing because I was thinking of the temperance card because here I am over here Eeyore. But I think it's good. I think it's important to highlight all these negatives, not so that we can wallow. I don't think that's the purpose. It's for awareness. That why do you think they're so upset about wokeness? They want everyone unconscious. So the best result, the best response is to get people motivated, get people activated about this stuff.
Well, there's two things that are playing out. One, you have what I call a new awakening, which is
Yes.
involving the young people, and then you have what I call the old conservative guard, which is playing to the people who first got involved with the Southern strategy,
Yeah.
who are now aging away. So you've got two things going on at once, and that's going to be the battle for 2024 in terms of where that goes. And I'm
Yeah.
feeling pretty much optimistic, given where things are going now.
I hope you're right. I live in a very conservative place. It's rural, semi-rural. So the young people are conservative. They're right-wing extremists. I've got a guy across the street who manufactures guns in his house. It's just unbelievable that constant coming and going of people in camouflage. It's remarkable. You wouldn't think necessarily that the young part of the population would be involved in that, but in this area they are. They have inherited that, and it's generational and it's
I think
cultural.
you're looking at a rural versus urban situation, and even in Wisconsin, the rural situation has been going, especially in the last election, uh, more liberal. So even though you're still going to have that,
Yeah.
I was listening to a news commentator. He said basically in Dane County in Wisconsin, 86% came out to vote, which is like,
That's incredible.
right, as if I'm recalling the number correctly, but it's an
Well,
extremely high
give or
number.
take. That's incredible.
So that is that has balanced off whatever conservative number was in the rural areas by
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah. Well,
But
you've heard of the Great American Redoubt.
not maybe I'm not too familiar with it.
Well, the name is not always that tossed about, but I know you've heard of the concept where Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, and parts of eastern Oregon, eastern Washington, they kind of want to make their own little country, their own. And a redoubt
Oh,
is a fort. It's an old-fashioned kind of. It's probably a Confederate term, and there it's a very white Christian national worldview, and people sharing that are flocking there and buying up property and building bunkers. And there's a couple of documentaries on YouTube about it if you want to check it out. uh, Real estate agents are making a killing in that area because of the influx of people. They want something off the beaten path. You almost have to fly in. They're escaping in fear from the rest of the country.
well, one has to ask where they're going to get the resources and how much money do they have to deal with resources.
Well,
And
that's right. Texas wants to secede from the union until they have a storm.
well, I think part of that is also um, political theater because they're looking at getting more people to vote, more people to get emotional about this. So they have to bring up these issues that will get people to the polls. But I think that uh, all in all, I'm not seeing a huge increase or influx of conservative voters. In the last elections, you had Democrats winning more and more of the seats.
It's just that they've gerrymandered the situation
Yeah.
to the point where they're still dominating the political voice. But we can hope that will change, and then we get somebody like that Democratic state senator who just defected the other day.
Hmm.
That's so disturbing. She pulled a Kirsten Sinema. She defected to the Republicans, and she defected because she was doing something that should be against the law or at least frowned upon. She
Hmm.
was attaching Christian symbology to her work communications,
Right.
separation of church and state, and somebody complained. And she
Hmm.
took offense because she's a woman of faith.
And
So
what does
she
that
became a
really mean?
Democrat, became a Republican overnight. And then the head of the Senate in her state, somebody big in her state came out and said, the most remarkable misstatement I've heard in a long time. Well, she converted from Democrat to Republican. Never mind, she got huge vote. She won by 20 points. You know how they calculate. The Democratic vote was so powerful. And his response was, well, she was following her conscience. She left the Democrats to go to the Republicans. The people have spoken. Okay. How? I don't know. But
Well, it depends how long her term is, and if she's no longer a Democrat, she can be opposed by a Democrat.
yeah, they did say something about the machinations of how that system works, as she might not be around for a long time. But it's so brazen. It's just astounding.
Well, this is what I call the last gasp of air. Within these next 2 years, they're either going to try to do something like in Amsterdam, or they're just going to lose. So, and I don't really see a scenario for what happened in Amsterdam repeating again. Now, I will say, and I kind of point this out in my fiction novel, that if you're looking to take control of a country, and you have three branches of government, executive, legislative, and judicial, the most influential branch that you want to control first is the judicial.
That's right. And so, how come Biden hasn't appointed a few more judges to the Supreme Court?
See, and that goes along with my argument that Democrats are cowards. He
Okay.
should.
So you agree that
Oh, yeah.
why are they not acting on that? I don't know enough about it to speak with authority, but my gut tells me, why are they not doing that?
I agree with you. I think, see, sometimes Democrats look at, what will the polls say? What will the people think? And you should be going, how do you save America?
What will the neighbors say?
Yeah, exactly. And you should be focused on how is this going to help the country? What can you do to help the country? Now, given that, we still haven't had an announcement with Biden running for president, and there's probably a lot of stuff we don't know that the DOJ is doing. So maybe there's stuff being worked on that we're not aware of.
I'm sure there's stuff going on. I, wish I was a fly on the wall, but eventually it will unfold. And it's been a pretty exciting couple of weeks already.
It has been, and I think you're probably going to get a little bit more excitement coming up.
One of the greatest disappointments of my life was the other day when the judge wouldn't allow cameras in the courtroom. I was bitterly disappointed.
Well, now I have a mixed feeling on that because the artist rendering is going to get splattered all over the place. I am not really seeing, I don't think Trump is going to run in the sense of the way that he wants to run.
You mean like an effective campaign? Yeah, it's
right.
going to be. He's going to be hampered. But Eugene Debs ran a presidential campaign from prison.
Right.
He was the union leader that was arrested for being, found guilty for being a communist, right? And
right, but Eugene Debs knew what he was doing.
He had two brain cells.
We're getting a rerun of the previous election.
Yeah.
And what's happening is he's losing support.
People are getting tired of it.
And I have my own theory in terms of why New York was first. And that is law enforcement. At any given day, there's 12,000 cops on the streets of New York. There's no way anything weird is going to happen. And that's just a day shift. That doesn't even go into the tactical units, the dog units, the horse units. So if there was anything that was going to happen, it would get short circuit.
That brings to mind a great question before we break this up. Sure. You're the perfect person to ask.
Thank you.
What do you see, or what do you think about the militarization of police? City police. How do you see that going? What do you tell me? Talk about that.
this actually goes to an article that was in the Southern Poverty Law Center about right-wing individuals going into police departments and into the military. Um, and then again, trying to set up like it was in the movie Amsterdam. I think what I'm seeing is that that's going to be short-circuited in the future, not necessarily the near future. And I think Biden's already, looking at some of that. So I'm not, too worried about it. In moving on 2 to 3 or 4 years from now.
I think there's a lot of rhetoric, a lot of debate about, defunding the police, a very poor choice of words for redirecting money into more psychological and social services rather than armament. However, they need to go back to step one, how they recruit. They give a lot of police departments do psychological testing of their applicants, and they actively seek out these sort of psychopathic, violent personalities.
I've actually trained police officers.
I was wondering about that.
And the reason I trained police officers is the ones that approached me didn't like the training that they were getting, because it was like, well, if you think that you're going to get hurt or something, or any sign of danger, go ahead and use your gun, because the taxpayers have so much money invested in you. And they came to me, it's like, is there another alternative? I go, sure, you use these tactics. And I know in Canada, there are a number of police officers that are taking Russian martial art, and they're getting promoted for taking down offenders and not harming
not
them.
firing a bullet. Well, somebody said an interesting argument the other day, and it seemed so obvious once I heard it. When people are proponents of more and more guns and the police becoming more militarized, and the argument is, well, guns don't kill people, people kill people. And if that's true, why do they give the military and the police guns to begin with?
Well, right, and you get the same argument like, "Oh, my gun is on the porch and they didn't kill anybody." But I mean, it's a distraction because they don't know what else to do. Because every time they trot that out, I try. Okay, how many mass shootings were there in Europe, in Australia, in Japan?
With the exact same statistics around mental health and all the other sort of factors, the variables that work into the culture, they have much lower. And what's the difference? Presence of guns.
Right, and well, there's the mental health argument, and then there's what, I don't know if you heard this one, the evil argument. The evil,
no,
the evil
sure
argument is you're not going to be able to stop evil by outlawing guns. And well, first of all, we're not really talking about outlawing all guns. But secondly, are you saying that there are no evil people in Europe, Australia, and Japan because there's no gun violence? It's like saying, are you saying there's no people with mental health issues in Europe, Australia, and Japan because there's no mass shootings of kids?
Well, it's that weird puritanical mindset. I mean, there are people out there who are active proponents of a puritanical sort of. Jonathan Edwards is their hero. Where did I? Oh, I know. There was a religious group that was politically involved, and I went on their website, and they were supporting the notion that the government should be run by these guys that Jonathan Edwards is their hero. And I'm, oh my God.
Well, I do want to talk a little bit more about police training. When I was going through police science classes, if a criminal runs away, you chase them. You don't shoot them.
So what a novel idea.
A lot of the stuff that's going on there, and they're using for their defense if a police officer does something bad is, well, it's their training. Well, maybe you should take a look at their training to see if they're being trained correctly.
I agree. Why don't they hire you? I don't understand. But you're retired now, correct?
I am retired. I'm retired, enjoying writing my my novels, like
Yeah.
the one you mentioned, Heath Harkness and the Immortality Plot. And I hope to write other novels as well. So I'm enjoying my retirement, and I've made my contribution. I've taught at universities. I've taught Fortune 500 companies, individuals, and again, it's a broad spectrum. And in the training, we had friends that were both liberals and conservatives, and that really wasn't an issue because you start, talking together and stuff, and start breaking down walls, and you're engaged in a common cause. You can develop friendships. I still have friends that are conservative, even though I'm not.
Well, it used to be the commonality. I mean, you used to be able to sit around the dinner table and have differences of political opinion, but you could focus on the length of your hair and you didn't have to to get nasty and really heated. But now it's gotten to the point where there's less and less common ground. It's very
It,
disturbing.
it goes back to the fairness doctrine, because with the fairness doctrine, you got both sides. Now, one side is listening to one part of the argument, and then the other side is listening to another part of the argument, and then one side's telling the truth, and the other side may not be telling the truth and talking about alternative facts.
And alternatively, some media are attempting to be what they call fair
Mhm.
by treating two sides of an argument with equal weight when one is patently lies. And but they're trying to give it some sort of legitimacy, and I think
Yeah,
that's
that's
equally as
that's
damaging.
that's not journalism.
Oh, I agree. I agree very much. Well, I see here if I got any other questions for you. One of my questions, just you don't have to answer this, you already have, but now that we've had our conversation, uh, it's funny. It's a little naive. Isn't the gun violence statistics, aren't they shocking?
They are, and fortunately, we still are able to publish those. Uh, and I think kind of what's shocking is the lack of interest and the lack of dedication to solving the issue. When the real issue, if you're looking at self-defense, can now be solved with non-lethal technologies. This, and nobody's really talking about that. I think this is the first time it's ever even being mentioned, that there are technologies out there that you no longer need to do that. Now, if you're looking at a male macho standpoint, in historically way back, guys would solve stuff with fists. I mean, it's not accepted, and it shouldn't be accepted, but they would think that, oh, a weapon, or no, that's just too easy. That's not fair. You can't prove your point uh, in that scenario. But now we've gone the opposite way, to where people with superior firepower are seen as the more alpha, or the more
Right. Yeah. The bigger
superior of
the
those.
gun, the more macho you
Right,
are.
versus ones where using hand-to-hand tactics isn't seen as macho enough.
Well, I think we have to bring back the perspective to the appropriate place. And for me, that's the statistic that in the United States right now, gun violence is the leading cause of death for children.
Yeah,
What's that got to do with macho?
exactly, exactly. And you notice also the pattern that in all these cases, I'm going to say the vast majority, when children in high school are involved, it's an assault weapon. It's a military style weapon, and we had the assault ban. And I think when the ban was lifted, assaults went up, like shootings were like 420% or something.
Right, and that goes hand in hand with the propagandizing, because I would say the vast majority. I'm just going to make a statement. The vast majority of these shooters, as opposed to the notion that they're mentally ill, which they may or may not be, but they've been weaponized by hatred, by the the racism, the misogyny, the homophobia, whatever particular problem they see that they need to eliminate. And that comes from right back to your argument about the media and the fairness doctrine.
Well, and a needed law on stochastic terrorism, because
Yeah.
I mean, you can't say some of the stuff that you say here in other countries. Now, granted, they could say, well, we have the First Amendment, but in the First Amendment, you can't yell fire in a theater.
Yeah.
You know,
There's
so there are
a
limitations.
personal responsibility that comes
Right.
into play. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, I'm not sure we've solved all the world's problems here today,
Just
but
a
it's
few.
been really fun. I've really enjoyed the conversation. It's nice to be able to talk about this stuff with somebody who knows what he's talking about.
Oh, thank you so much.
You know, I really enjoyed it. And your book is wonderful. And I think the feature of this book that I appreciate so much is that you can isolate a chapter to apply to your particular life circumstance. So if you've got a young child and you're looking for a babysitter, there's a whole how-to guide in one chapter. You don't have to read the whole book. And if you're old, you do have to read the whole book because the elder abuses at the end.
Yeah,
I thought that was very clever.
well, see, I wanted to cover violence from birth to death. And
Oh, okay. Yeah.
the other thing that I wanted to do in there too is list resources where you can get updated statistical information, because
That was really good. And I felt guilty not diving into all those statistics and names of resources that, yeah, but you know, we'd be here all day because there are a lot of resources. So I recommend this book very much if people need to know where to go for domestic violence or just, you know, whatever. It's a great book. Very, very good. Very entertaining.
and when I was teaching women's self-defense at the university, that was a textbook that I used. And by the end of the semester, every woman knew how to do a CCAP. In other words, court access to find out if the person she was dating with had any criminal convictions.
Oh, very good.
So, and people would also say, well, the statistics you put in there, I mean, they're outdated. Well, statistics change every 6 months. I mean, by the time the book is out, it's outdated.
One of
By
the
list the
reasons why
resources where
I
you can
kind
get
of glossed over, some of the statistics because it was apparent. You know, I read this in your book, and then I read the newspaper the next day, and already the violence had gone up, or the gun ownership numbers had gone up, and it had been less than a year. So I figured, well, people can look it up because it'll be different tomorrow than it was yesterday.
Yeah,
So.
I had statistics at the graduate level, and the important thing was that they get updated by federal agencies like every 6 months. So if I put, check the FBI, check other of those resources for the updated statistics, and most importantly, too, the statistics of assaults in colleges, which nobody is really looking at.
Horrifying. I couldn't believe it. Yeah. Terrible. Well, it's all in here. If you want the details, I recommend this very much. And Wes, thank you so much for being patient with me, and then for I have a pile of books that I've already read that I have notes on, and I kind of have a plan, but not, you know how it is.
Well, I thank you for the opportunity to express my opinions and discuss my book and see how all of us can help this country succeed and get better.
Thank you. And there's nothing better than a good, healthy debate. And this was a really fun conversation. I really appreciate it. Maybe we'll have you come back the next time you write a book.
I would
Your
love
next
that.
book.
In fact, if you have an interest in fiction, give me a holler.
It's harder for me to synopsize fiction. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah,
it's
absolutely.
Really hard. But I did have Greg Olear. I don't know if you recognize that. He's got a podcast, a Substack. He's a commentator, a political commentator, and mostly a writer. But he, for fun, wrote a book about the Byzantine Empire. And it was a novel, and it was great. So I did have him come on, but I didn't synopsize the book. We just talked about the history behind it.
I have something unique for you. I did another book, the first ever women's self-defense adult coloring book.
Oh, cool.
I will send you the link to that. And the reason I did that is because the topic is so shocking that by coloring it in, you get to relax and understand the tactics.
That'd
So
be
this one
very
goes
good for teenage, like a high school.
exactly,
Yeah, that
or
would be
before.
very good. Yeah, even.
I'll
Yeah.
send you the link.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I'm sure everybody appreciated and enjoyed it, I hope. And we'll have you back again sometime soon. Thank you.
Thank you
And
much. Have a great day.
oil, slancha.